Hey, everybody, this is Mr. Stewart with another opportunity to share some thoughts from God's Word for you in our Tuesday morning chapels. And believe me, I would really much prefer that we'd be able to do all this together in the sanctuary where I could see everybody's face, but I've kind of gotten used to this new way of doing meetings and Google Meets, and I know it's kind of tough for all of us, but at least I get the opportunity to share with you, and that's the important thing. And even though I can't see your faces, I can kind of picture them in my mind. So we'll just make the best of this morning and talk about God for a little bit and His will for our lives. All right. I want to start off by asking you all a question, and this might be kind of hard for you to answer since you're just in middle school and elementary school. Maybe you can't really think of any quick answers to this, but I'll ask it anyway. We'll talk about this as we go through the morning. What is the hardest thing God has ever asked you to do for Him? What's the hardest thing God's ever asked of you? Think about that for a minute. Some of you may not be able to think of much of anything right now. I'm just in middle school. I'm just in elementary school. I mean, God hasn't really asked really much of anything for me or from me right now. Maybe, and you probably know who you are if this is you. Maybe the hardest thing God is asking you to do right now is obey your parents. All right. And maybe some of you are thinking or want to say to me, hey, Mr. Stewart, that's harder than you think it is. You don't know my parents. Okay, I don't. All right. But the fifth commandment does not say, honor your father and your mother, unless they're asking unreasonable bedtimes or want to take your phone away because you're misusing it or whatever else. Then you can kind of pick and choose when you honor your parents. Bible doesn't say that. All right. You still have to honor your mother and your father. All right. Even though it's hard. But what is the hardest thing God is asking you to do right now as a student, as a follower of Him? We just finished a study. The reason I ask this is we just finished a study in our adult Sunday school class here on Sunday mornings of the book of Ezekiel. And we spent a long time in Ezekiel, months in Ezekiel, because it's a long book. And we were doing some other things kind of mixed in there too. But one of the things that we saw right away when we started this study is that Ezekiel had a tough job as God's prophet to his people. And most of these people that God called to be prophets had tough jobs. But Ezekiel, for some reason, seemed to have a lot of really hard things laid on him in his ministry. And he prophesied for God for about over 20 years. All right, so he was at this a long time, and it came at a very, very kind of dark time in Israel's history because they were about to be taken off into captivity. And he prophesied throughout that whole period, probably the lowest point in Israel's history, God's judgment on them. But in chapter 4 of Ezekiel, this is early in the book, and God has just called him to ministry. I want you to be my messenger, Ezekiel. And this is what he says. This is just in his commissioning of Ezekiel. This is in chapter 3. He says, Son of man, go to the people of Israel and speak my words to them. All right. But they will not listen. The people of Israel are not willing to listen to you because they are not willing to listen to me. For all the Israelites are hardened and obstinate. That means stubborn. They don't want to listen to anybody. But I will make you as unyielding and hardened as they are. I will make your forehead like the hardest stone, harder than flint. Usually when you say somebody's got a hard head, it's kind of a insult. Somebody's hard-headed or they got a cement head or whatever. In this context is actually kind of a compliment because God's going to strengthen Ezekiel for this task. All right. And then in the very next chapter, this is kind of what he's talking about. In chapter 4, first assignment he gives Ezekiel is to build kind of a little model in front of his house of a siege. Just build up walls, build like a rampart going up the walls, because this is what's going to happen to Jerusalem in the very short, not too distant future. Build a model of a siege, an old-fashioned Old Testament siege, like out of Legos or something like that. Just kind of you would make a model like a toy in your living room or something. So build this out of clay, and then I want you to lie on your side, Ezekiel, and lie on your side in front of this siege works, lie on your left side for 390 days. Think about that, 390 days. Some of you may be thinking, that's over a year. Yes, it is. That's longer than a full, that's almost a year and a month to lie on your side. Now, presumably he had time, opportunities to get up and go to the bathroom and eat or whatever, but basically that was his job, lie on his side for 390 days. And some of you may be thinking, oh man, I got so many things going on right now. It'd be awesome if I could just lie on my side. Okay, but you're not watching TV or Netflix, or you can't be on your phone or anything like that. You're just lying there staring at this thing you made, this little model of a siege works for 390 days. I'm guessing that a lot of you, I'm sure I'm the same way, could barely handle lying on my side and doing nothing for 390 seconds. That's about 6.5 minutes. You should try that sometime. Just try lying on your side, no TV, no entertainment in front of you, just lying on your side, staring at a wall for 6.5 minutes and not move around. Okay. See if you can handle that. I don't know if I could, honestly. If I were really tired, maybe, but in the middle of the day when I kind of want to be up and around doing things, that'd be a hard command. So that was Ezekiel's first assignment. Build this model, lie on your side in front of it for 390 days. And then when you're done with that, can you get up and run around and do things? No, no. His next assignment was to turn over and lie on his right side and stare at this model that he had built for another 40 days. So almost 400 days. Okay. Ezekiel was to do nothing but lie on his side in front of all the people. This was for all the people to see. And I'm sure that he was probably ridiculed. He had at least people kind of staring at him like, what is going on? And that was the whole point. All right. God was using him as an example to the people of what was coming for them down the road. They didn't see it yet. They didn't know it yet, but judgment was coming. And that was Ezekiel's job. All right. Then a couple of chapters later, God gives them another task to make a meal and to cook a meal, but to cook it over, I don't know how else to say this, human poop. To use human poop as the fuel for the fire to cook this meal. Now, some of you are probably already going like, all right. When I first read this, when we all read this in class, we all kind of felt the same way, like, oh no, I don't care what you're cooking in that pot. I don't care how much bacon it has or yummy stuff in that pot. If you're using human poop to cook it, I don't want any part of it. And Ezekiel says the same thing. God, please, no. And God actually kind of relents. So one of those few times where God's like, okay, I'll let you use animal poop to cook your meal, but I want you to cook it that way. All right. And there's some other stuff that happens to Ezekiel I don't even want to get into. Okay, you'll have to read the book for yourself. It's a pretty fascinating book, and a lot of it is prophecy, and a lot of it is, judgment, judgment, judgment. But God really puts Ezekiel through a lot in that book. And we talked about it as we went through the book, all the things that God had Ezekiel do and put Ezekiel through. But then, as we were talking about this, we're talking about other people that God has called throughout the Bible, and the other Old Testament prophets like Jeremiah, all right, and Isaiah, and going all the way back even to the book of Genesis, all right, and starting there. And whenever God calls one of his prophets, or anybody for that matter, to do something for him, go here, go there, give this message, talk to Pharaoh, talk to this king, whatever it was, God always gives the same command. And this is kind of what I want to have us think about today, and hopefully it'll be comforting to us. The number one command God gives in the Bible, most frequent command, not number one command, the most frequent command that God gives in the Bible. Not what I would have thought it was. I would have thought it would be love the Lord your God. Okay, that's the most important command because Jesus is asked about that in the Gospels. And he says the most important command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? Some of you may remember that passage. And the second most important command is love your neighbor as yourself. So those are the most important commands. But the one that you see most often in the Bible, from start to finish, from Genesis to Revelation, is don't be afraid. Fear not. Do not fear. Okay, whenever God gives some tough commands or assignments to people that he's called to do things for him, he will almost always accompany it with, don't be afraid. I am going to be with you. He says it to Ezekiel. He says it to all the other prophets. All right, do not be afraid. And I know, students, that this has been a challenging, tough year and a half for all of us with this COVID-19 and all of you in and out of school and us teachers kind of in and out of the classroom and teaching in person and teaching like I am today, kind of on camera, looking at a little green dot, you know, and it's hard. It's been hard for all of us, and there have been some incredible challenges that we've had to face in our lives, and some of us have lost family members. We've had family members who have lost jobs. I mean, I know how tough this has been, this pandemic. That hopefully we seem to be maybe kind of coming out of finally. Right, and even this school year, we were all back in the building, and then, this Omicron flare happened, and kids started having to kind of quarantine. Teachers had to start to quarantine. It's been rough. All right, and it's been very easy. And I know I've struggled with this, and our family has struggled with this, and maybe you have struggled with this, and your families have struggled with this. Being fearful. What is the future gonna hold for us? How is God going to provide for us? Is God even still in control out there? It just seems like it's chaos and a mess, and nobody seems to have any answers, and nobody seems to know what's going on. It's been really, really easy to have fear. And I just want to share a little bit with you today, just from some examples in the Bible of God being in control as he is now, and telling his people and telling you and me, all right, don't be afraid. And I just was just thinking in my mind and jotting down on a piece of paper, just going all the way back even to the book of Genesis and all the people. And I'm not going to go through every single example. That we don't have enough time to go through every example in the Bible, but I want us just to think about the people that God has called to do some really difficult things for him. And every step of the way, he says, do not fear, do not be afraid. He tells Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, get up and move to a land I'm going to show you. Just pack up your things and move. All right. And Abraham does. And then later, he says, your descendants are going to, and the entire world is going to be blessed through your descendants, because one of his descendants was going to be Jesus. All right. And Abraham says, I'm an old man. All right. How's this going? I don't have any kids. And God supernaturally blesses him with a son. You probably remember that story. All right. But every step of the way, God says, I will be with you and I will bless you. He says that to his son Isaac. He says that to his grandson Jacob. He says that to Joshua. All these patriarchs in the Old Testament, God appears to them in dreams and visions and says over and over, this land I'm going to give you, these descendants of yours are going to fill the earth. And every step of the way, I will be with you. I will bless you. All right. One of the most famous examples, the story of Moses. All right. A lot of you know the story of Moses, right? The burning bush experience where God appears to Moses miraculously in this burning bush and has a job for him. I want you, Moses, to lead my people out of Israel. And Moses says, you must have the wrong person. You don't want me. And God has to over and over, you, Moses. I will be with you. I will give you the words to say. I will give you miracles. And Moses keeps resisting almost to the point where God gets angry at him, a little upset with him. Moses, stop it. All right. You're the man. I'm not making a mistake here. I haven't miscalculated. You're going to be the one to deliver my people, and I will be with you. In fact, Pharaoh, who is supposedly the most powerful man in the world, is just kind of putty in my hands. And he even tells Pharaoh that too. I raised you up, Pharaoh, just for this moment where I can show how powerful and strong I am as God. All right. And so he uses Moses for that. And then, throughout Old Testament history, as God's people are kind of turning away from him and not following him and not obeying him, he sends prophet after prophet, like Ezekiel and Jeremiah and these other prophets. And God gives them a very tough assignment. All right. Tell these people, give them the message I'm going to tell you. But I'm just telling you right now, they're not going to listen to you. All right. If you got an assignment like that was kind of had failure kind of built into it, you'd probably be kind of discouraged right from the start. Wait a minute, you're giving me an impossible assignment. You're telling me to give this message to people who aren't going to listen to you, to me. why are we, if they're not going to listen to you, God, they're certainly not going to listen to me. And God says, I know, they're not going to listen to you, but do it anyway. All right. So when I judge these people, when I carry them off into captivity or have them carried off into captivity, all right, nobody can say, hey, I didn't see this coming. Nobody warned me. Nobody told me. All right. I'm going to be able to say, oh, yeah, I told you over and over and over. So Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, all these other prophets, do what I'm telling you to do because I will be with you. And frequently, we don't have to look at all these examples. God shows a little bit of his glory in these visions. God gives a little glimpse of who he is. All right. Isaiah is so overwhelmed that it just kind of knocks him to his knees. All right. Ezekiel has this incredible vision that goes on multiple chapters at the very beginning of the book of Ezekiel of God's glory, God's power. All right. And it's amazing. And all of these prophets are just kind of, they're speechless. They're so overwhelmed by how powerful and how um, mighty God is. And that's the God that we all serve and worship today. It's the same God. He hasn't changed. All right. In the New Testament, same thing. Jesus tells his disciples, and a lot of us know this passage, the Great Commission, go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. But before that, Jesus says, all authority on earth has been given to me. And after that, he says, I will be with you to the very end of the age. All right. In the middle, yes, is a very difficult assignment. Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. But before that and after that, Jesus says basically, don't be afraid. I'm in control. I'll be with you. So, what's the hardest thing God is asking you to do or has asked you to do? And for a lot of you, it may not be anything he's asking you to do. It's something he's asking you to bear up under. All right. A tough life circumstance. And you don't understand, like we were talking about earlier, COVID-19 or losses of jobs or health situations or deaths in the family. And you don't understand like what's going on. Why is God doing this to me? I don't understand. And sometimes God responds to those questions that we have in prayer. Paul had an experience like that where he had some kind of physical ailment that was bothered, and we don't know what it was. He just describes it as this thorn in the flesh that I had. It wasn't a real thorn. And we don't know what it was. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't describe it. But whatever it was painful. It was ongoing. It wouldn't go away. And Paul prays 3 times to God to take it away. And God says, no. And so the lesson for me, for us is, Paul wrote half of the New Testament. And there were times in his life that he didn't get his prayers answered the way he wanted. Same thing for us. You know, sometimes God just has things happen to us that we can't explain and don't understand, and we pray out to God, and sometimes God will answer those prayers, sometimes he won't. But what he tells Paul and what he says throughout his word, and what I want to leave with you all today, is that God is always going to be with us, and we don't need to be afraid because he loves us and he'll be with us. And that's been a lifelong difficult thing for me to learn, and I'm still learning it. All right, that because there are still times even today where I'm fearful about the future. I'm fearful about things that are happening in my family. My wife has an autoimmune disease. She has a disease called Crohn's disease, and so her health is sometimes not great, and I worry about that. I worry for her. I worry about my son who just got married last summer. That God's going to provide for him, and he has already, just in miraculous ways. But there are still times that I worry, and I want to be fearful, and God has to come to me and tell me the same way that I kind of want to pass on to you: do not fear, do not be afraid. If there's anything I can have you take away from today's talk, and carry on the rest of the week and the rest of the school year, no one knows what's going to happen. But one thing that we can count on, because God is clear in this in the Bible, and he's made this clear time after time and time again to person after person after person. is don't be afraid. I am right there with you. Even though you can't see me, God is with us. God is with you all, and He loves you, and He loves 4C Christian School. And I hope this is encouraging, and I wish you all a great day and a great rest of the week. And thank you so much for your time. God bless.